A project director in Lake Flato's Eco Conservation Studio, John Taylor, also known to many as JT, is chiefly passionate about responsible stewardship of the natural environment. He brings knowledge of high-performance design strategies to all of his projects, including advanced energy modeling, carbon life cycle assessment, as well as passive house design certification. JT enjoys designing buildings with aspirational design and sustainability goals in demanding natural environments, which currently include work in the hurricane-prone Bahamas, as well as Lake Flato's first Phius design certified project right here in Illinois that we're talking about. JT is a Deep South native and registered architect and a graduate of Mississippi State University with previous experience at architecture and design firms in Mississippi and Maine. He enjoys working remotely from his home state of Mississippi in a sinker cypress-clad office full of oddities, including numerous fossils and saltwater reef aquarium. In his spare time, JT enjoys cooking, spending time outdoors, and traveling with his wife and daughter, always keen to experience a new landscape. So, JT, I will hand it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, you guys, for having me, and huge thank you to Lindsay here for asking us to present about this project. Eco Achievers and Lindsay and her team has been such a pleasure to work with thus far, and we're really excited to continue working with them over the next year as this project is built, as they're the Phius verifier for the project. So yeah, we're really excited to share this project with you guys, and I'm going to start out here by giving you sort of a broad overview of the design process that we at Lake Flato kind of undergo with every project, and then talk a lot about this kind of greater narrative of how we weave the story of net zero and passive house into a greater story of resource management and conservation that is really, I think, acutely tied to this really special place, which is the Forest Preserve right here up in Lake County. So yeah, we're really excited to share this with you, and I'm just going to jump in. And the first thing I want to do is just explain that the title of this little presentation, which is Nature, Place, Craft, and Passive House. So this is kind of a riff off of Lake Flato's latest commercial monograph that documents some of our more recent public-facing buildings. And the title of that book is Nature, Place, Craft, Restraint. And those four words, I think, really encompass an ethos that at Lake Flato we approach every project with. And funny enough, on this project, no surprise that the restraint in a lot of ways came from passive house certification. And we see that as something to be embraced and something that needs to be very much married to these other three words, which are nature, place, and craft. And so it's again, weaving this narrative about communicating the value of something like passive house and net zero to the general public. That's a huge part of this project, as you'll see, is the educational piece to just anyone who comes to this preserve and is confronted with this building. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Lake Flato. We're a growing firm. I'll say we have about 150 design staff, grown quite a bit in the last 10 years or so. Our main office has always been in San Antonio, Texas, and we have another office in Austin, Texas. And a couple of us, including myself, who are scattered around the country, kind of operating as satellites. So I live and work in Mississippi, of all places, which is where I'm from. But Lake Flato, this is us standing on the dam of the Nueces River at Ted Flato's ranch out in West Texas. And a bit of an aside here, this is the first year in 35 years that this gathering, which we do this time every year, isn't happening because there is no water in this river. It is completely dry, which is, quite kind of jarring and brings us this conversation about resource management and the fight against climate change just right to the front, and just makes projects like this and these narratives all the more important to share. But at Lake Flato, again, we dip our kind of toes into all these different types of buildings and work on a really wide range of projects, all the way from custom residential to work with really large institutions and municipalities. And within the firm, we operate within these 6 studios, kind of roughly divided by market sector. So we have the residential studio, the eco-conservation studio, independent schools, civic and cultural, higher education, and urban environments. And so I, as an architect and this project, have operated within our eco-conservation studio. And I think this is a really cool thing that I don't know of many other firms that have a sort of kind of niche interest in these specific projects that operate as a studio. And this studio, more than I guess any of our other approaches every project with really rigorous, kind of study with design performance. And most of these projects in our studio involve some sort of really intense connection to a landscape or a programmatic aspect of connecting to that landscape, whether it's a visitor center, environmental learning center like this one, a botanical garden, a public park, ecotourism, eco-hospitality. There's usually this really clear sort of connection with educating whoever is coming to these buildings about the landscape that they're in and why it should be conserved and valued. So this project was an awesome addition to our studio, and one that we were just thrilled to get. And so this is a map of Lake Flato's built projects around the country. You can see obviously a high concentration in Texas, but we've kind of spread out to the coasts and now filling out the spaces between. You can see the pink dots represent all of our Phius projects. There's only one pink dot, and it's this project. It's our first passive house project. So we have, I guess, 3 or 4 of us in the firm who have a really specific interest in passive house. And I have previous experience at a firm in Maine that did exclusively passive house. But so we've kind of been involved to the side of these conversations and at PhiusCon, but this is our first kind of big opportunity to really get involved in the conversation from the project side. So we're really, really excited about that and look forward to hopefully doing a lot more Phius work in the future. So that's just a little bit about Lake Flato. Now I'm going to transition over to telling you about this project specifically. So you all know where Chicago is, obviously. The site for this building is a forest preserve in Lake County, just at the southern edge of Lake County. And our client, the Lake County Forest Preserve District, I guess went out with the conventional, RFP process for this project, and we interviewed. And during our interview, we talked a lot about this connection to the land and telling the story of design performance through the place, and that how strong that narrative could be in terms of how it could be valued and appreciated by the public. I think that really resonated with them. It's amazing to come to a project like this with a client like the Forest Preserve District, who just based on this map, you see how much land and natural resources they manage. And it's just such a passion of theirs to just really make clear this message of conservation and appreciation of natural areas. So they came to us with this very clear set of goals, even before we started design work, which is just amazing. Like to have a client, come to a project like this with such clear vision articulated from the start was amazing. And just the alignment of their goals with, kind of the way that we approach our work, I think is really special for us. And we recognize that. So I'm not going to read all of these, but you can see that the first bullet point is net zero energy. And the second bullet point is compliance with the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation Net Zero Energy Building Grant Program, which is something that some of you are probably familiar with. It's a grant for net zero buildings, and it requires living building or passive house certification. So we knew pretty early on we were going to be going one of those routes, which we were really excited about. You can see all these other goals. Again, just some of the words popping out here are a little bit more qualitative, coming from long lasting and marrying well with educational programming, welcoming and inclusive, be easily operated and maintained, extremely durable and long lasting materials. A bit of an aside on that specifically. The Forest Preserve told us they wanted what they call a forever building, something that they can operate for 200 plus years without a major overhaul. So that was a huge factor in the design process, as we'll see later. The last 2 goals here you can see are really qualitative, being the highlighted little part here, talking about the indoor and outdoor experience and a strong relationship to the natural environment. Along with that, very interestingly, is that this building should tell the story of plants and animals of this place, as well as the human history. So there's a lot here. There's a lot to synthesize into a building that we were really excited about it. And from the very start of the process, again, we knew that passive house would be a really big component of this, but it is a component, right? There's still the nature and the place and the craft part of it. And so the first thing that we did actually, which is kind of fun, we don't do this super often, was pick a site for the building. They did not have a specific location for the building in mind. And this new building being a small education center that would house classrooms and service spaces, but be essentially a place that was purposefully built to house their educational programming, which is very robust. They do this very, very well. They have kind of standing programs they've been doing for decades with public schools and other community organizations. They're very well respected in the community. This is a map of the forest preserve itself, and you can see all these like hatches and shades, and what that's telling us is that basically there's only 3 kind of areas of the forest preserve where you could put a building, even because all of this other land is unbuildable for various reasons, being the floodplain, being nature preserve, easements, etc. And I think we pretty quickly narrowed in that the new building should go where a lot of their existing infrastructure is located, which is where their welcome center is. And zooming in on those existing facilities, it may seem kind of obvious once we get to the next couple of slides that we put the building where it should have gone, but it was not that obvious when we started. And we did a lot of iteration back and forth with them, understanding their goals. And does the building want to be here, a part of the welcome center? Does it want to be here? And, part of this kind of complex of buildings and share the infrastructure. But the more and more we talked with them, it became clear that where they do their educational programs now, which is these 2 cabins, is actually a really awesome place for this new building. And the reason why is because of its access to what the Forest Preserve calls the resource, which is these trails and this amazing ecosystem that is called the flatwoods, which is basically like a northern swamp. Down here in Mississippi, we have swamps and alligators and mosquitoes, and this is different than that, but it's still really special in that this is a place where you have endangered amphibians and lots of rare plants and insects that rely on this really special relationship with the Des Plaines River. And these programs happen right on the edge of it. And so we kind of zeroed in on this area to understand that, okay, we know the building wants to have this like great access to the resource of the forest. And looking more carefully at the site conditions, we also felt really strongly that this building did not need to disturb any land that was previously undisturbed. And so the removal of these cabins actually wasn't on the table when we were brought onto the project, but became on the table once we kind of talked through why we thought the building should go in this zone. So you can see here this sort of layering of all of the various constraints, the big one being the floodplain. This is the 500-year floodplain, which we believe will become the 100-year floodplain. Planning, looking ahead into the future and understanding that one of those cabins is actually in really, really terrible shape in the floodplain. It has flooded before several times in the last 10 or 20 years, furthering the idea that the 500-year floodplain is becoming something else. And then the other thing to acknowledge here is that there's lots of trees. This is a forest preserve, and there's some trees that are dead or in declining health that needed to be taken out anyway. But these 2 trees in particular are really special. Going to the site and standing between them, they're just really, really beautiful, what we would call heritage trees. And also an acknowledgement that trees aren't perfect circles like we see on surveys. And so we went out there and actually measured the canopies of these trees to understand what was our buildable area and footprint in this location. Fortunately, our client also happens to be the landscape architect. So they were able to really kind of help us fine tune how close we could get to these trees and ensure that they thrive once this building is under construction and then built permanently. So we came up with this sort of like amoeba shape of buildable area that has this great access to the woods, this trail network, and then also has a little bit that pokes out, to get good solar access for PV. And thinking about all of those things, and at the same time, we came up with this building footprint, sort of an H shape, that is actually going to be built in 2 phases. The first phase being the T, if you will, part of it, and that's what's being built right now. And then a second phase, which is the sort of mirrored image of the top half on the southern half. And so reason for that being, again, the way that the educators use these cabins is as a launching point, as a trailhead into the forest, and a really special experience of arriving at this building and then going to a classroom and then departing that classroom directly onto a trail to learn about the forest. So skip ahead to the plan here. And you can see that this is kind of a long, skinny building, which from a performance, perspective and in terms of envelope is not the most efficient. We knew that. But we also knew that there were a lot of other aspects driving what the building wanted to be related to views and access out to the forest, having light on 3 sides of these classrooms on each end, really, really important. And so we knew there was gonna be a lot of pressure on the envelope. And we'll get to that, the kind of nerdy stuff part of that here soon. But also really special is this space, which is a screened porch, which is we got to throw a porch on everything at Lake Plato. That's the joke. So we had to have a porch and a place to gather, a place to spill out, because it's beautiful up here a lot of the year. I mean, it's awesome. So you want to, when you're in this building, we want to be outside and you want to open the windows and you want to experience the forest. So I'm going to take you around some just kind of 3D views to orient you around the building and kind of what it looks like and point out some of the unique things. So this is if you're kind of driving up, and this is kind of what you would see, the building kind of poking through the trees here. And that southern building will be built, kind of in this zone. But for now, you see the end of this screen porch. And swinging around, this is if you're kind of walking up the pedestrian path, you enter up on this ramp and into the building that way. And the classrooms occupy the ends of the building. And this was, kind of our big moment here to do something really, I think, special with the windows, which of course we knew were going to be critical to this project because of the design performance, but also that connection to the outdoors and having this sort of glazed, we were dreaming of this like glazed corner condition, which is really difficult to pull off. But I think we did it, and they're fabricating these things right now. I'll talk a little bit more about the windows here in a second, but really designing these classrooms from the inside out was how this worked. And these really fun dormers, in each of the classrooms that bring in that northern light and also have an operable window with a remote operator. So you can pop that open and got operable windows on the other side and really let this building breathe. And when it's beautiful, again, we don't have that luxury in the summer in Mississippi. We close everything because of how hot and humid it is. But there's times here where you could do it, for weeks out of the year, and it would be lovely. So just spinning around a little bit more. Again, the views out of the classroom and the access out of the classrooms were really the big design drivers here. And we knew that there would be a lot of pressure on the envelope and the performance of the windows and the glass, which we spent a lot of time figuring out. And so I think a really exciting thing about this project that's really special for us and the Forest Preserve is that we're not only, using really high performance windows, but we're also using integrally bird-friendly glass made by Arnold Glass in Germany, a product some of you may have heard of called Ornolux. And it's a glass that has a UV pattern applied to one of the inner surfaces that birds can see really well. And humans, you can kind of see it in certain light, but for the most part, it kind of disappears, a lot like a spider web. So thinking about the biomimicry of that, but that was something that the client told us from the very beginning was absolutely mission critical to have an integral solution to bird-friendly glazing. And we knew that was going to be really hard because there's not like a kit of parts, that exists out there from a manufacturer that can do this. And it was kind of marrying two worlds that, and up till now, haven't really belonged together. But we got this collaboration going with Schuko, a German window manufacturer. So the windows will be manufactured in Germany and the glass will be manufactured in Germany, and those will be shipped to Turkey and assembled in Turkey, fully glazed, and then shipped to the site and in full pieces. And that was another big thing. This is like a 10-foot by 8-foot piece of glass that will arrive to the site fully glazed as one component. So that was in part because of some of the union labor considerations as well, this being a public project in this area. So there's a lot to consider that we're still, very much talking about now that the building is under construction. I'll get to some of that here in a little bit. Now I'm going to shift gears and talk about some of the things that maybe are a little bit more interesting to this crowd, which is arguably one of the most informed groups we've talked about this project with. And that's really our process with Passive House pre-certification. And the project is design certified and is anticipated to be 2021 Source Zero certified at the end of the day. And so this is kind of a narrative, if you will, of our process. And I think that, again, the theme of this project and really how we've tried to structure our design process is how do we make this information accessible to a client who is fairly savvy but doesn't have a building science background like some of you may have, but then also how do we tell this story to the general public in a way that the value is understood and embraced and seen as something worth doing. That's the big mission. And so this part is a little bit more geared toward the building science, client, professional side. And then I have another part that's really geared towards the elementary student or the average homeowner that's going to come to this building. So we're going to balance our gains and our losses, right? And so the first thing we want to do is clarifying with the potential client. Even these are slides we show to potential clients who are interested in passive house, is clarifying that passive house is a path to net zero first and foremost. That's why we're doing this. We want to reduce, our use of non-renewable resources. That this is a really great way to do it. And so when we say the word energy use, it's like, okay, that's clients think, well, let's do all LED lighting and have one less coffee pot. And like, great, that matters. But there's a lot more that goes into that. And that can really be divided into these like 4 primary tenets of passive things and active things. And so the passive things being the way that you build and occupy the building is going to determine a lot about how much energy you need to make it comfortable, right? And then the active side is making it comfortable with fresh air and heating and cooling. And again, the communication to a client is that this is a shift in your investment. It is not this crazy departure from what we've always done. It is kind of approaching it in a different way. And so with a conventional building and process, you're really kind of heavily leaning into the systems aspect of building because buildings have been thought of quite recently as like disposable, but for a forever building, 200-year-plus building, where cost of energy over time is a big deal. If you're talking about a 200-year building, you are shifting your investment into those passive things, the envelope, and using your internal loads in your favor. And so another really important thing to clarify is that that investment is very relative to the scale of the building. So small buildings, because they have a lot more envelope relative to their volume, are going to need more investment in the envelope than a really big building like a warehouse. There's a lot less pressure on the envelopes. This is a big conversation once we got White Construction, who's the contractor, on board, and they've had awesome experience doing some commercial scale passive house projects that are certified. And they kind of came to the table with this diagram more so in mind. And it took a lot of back and forth and energy modeling to kind of prove that this was really the territory we were going to be in because of the scale of this building. And Lindsay and her team was really, really helpful in kind of facilitating that conversation. And so here's a slide. We actually made this slide for this project about a year and a half ago in schematic design before we had done any energy modeling, before we had a WWOOFie model or anything. And so I think it's really cool that this is pretty much what the building looks like if you cut a section through it in terms of the assemblies. And a lot of our assumptions ended up being really true. But aside from that, this is a slide that we've used, again, for this client and other potential clients, and just explaining the tenets of passive house and why they're important between insulation, air tightness, high performance windows, and also that you can open your windows. Like, that's a question I know that you all probably have to answer, is like, can you open your windows in a passive house? Answer is yes, absolutely. These are super healthy buildings and are meant to also connect to the outside. Just because it's passive house doesn't mean it has to be a little sad box without windows. And so now I want to kind of shift gears and maybe, again, some of the more building sciencey stuff. And these are kind of just a few stories about really what we were doing when we were looking at balancing our gains and our losses on this project, knowing that the envelope was going to be a really big deal, and calibrating it, sort of dialing it in to what it needed to be based on the WWOOFie model. And so the first kind of story is with the foundation insulation. And so this is a detail of the typical foundation for this building. You can see highlighted in orange is insulation. And you show this to a client and they're like, okay, I see a lot of orange. It's like, what do I do with this? But then, you overlay it with like a therm assessment and say, oh, I get it now. I understand hot and cold, and that I understand why that insulation is there. And so it's, in terms of communicating value, that's been something that's been really helpful. But then we also have to communicate that if we were going like 80% of the way with passive house, we would pat ourselves in the back and say, great job, guys. But when you take through full certification, right, there's a certain rigor and intensity of accepting and embracing the reality of these conditions and not just stopping at it's almost good enough. And there is true value to that. And so the next step for us, because pursuing certification, is saying this detail is great, but it's not perfect. And we have to acknowledge that it's not perfect and calculate what that means in terms of the energy demand on this building. And so in this case, we said, you know what, we're doing great. It's hardly a thermal bridge at all, but it still is one. And we have to acknowledge that. And it represents, because this is a continuous condition, about 1.5% of our maximum heating load target given to us by Phius. We have to acknowledge that, because the story is that this may seem so insignificant, and it, in a lot of ways it may be on other projects, but you have 20 or 30 little things like this around the building, and they add up, and suddenly you're 30, 40, 50% over, and you have to make up these things in a really significant way. The next little kind of anecdote here has to do with the through fastening method for insulation. And so again, from the start of this project, we knew we were going to have to be really aggressive with our envelope design, and said that the way that we attach insulation to this building is kind of mission critical to that. It needs to be really, really efficient. And because it's a kind of a small building, and we have a contractor on board who we have confidence in the quality control during construction, because they know high performance envelopes, we can do it with through fastening screws, which is really efficient in terms of the thermal bridging. But again, we can't just pat ourselves in the back and say, good job, guys. We have to calculate the loss from that still. And that represents another 1.5% of our heating load. And then, kind of what do we do with that? We have this like 3% loss, which at the time, it seems like so insignificant, but you're looking at a WFI model and you see these targets slowly inching up, and you're fearing the red X, right, as you're dialing in your energy model. And you get to this like point where you're like, we have no margin and we need a margin. And the story is that we had to do something in the envelope. We'd already gone through this very exhaustive process of kind of dialing in a lot of the systems, and that we needed to do something that was cost effective, but to get our margin of safety back. And so we said, you know what, we're just going to increase the depth of the roof by 6 inches. We're already making these sort of trusses that we're filling with insulation. A really cost effective way to get this kind of margin back is going to be to just get a little bit more insulation of loose fill cellulose. So that's what we did. And the question, again, I would ask myself, and any sane person would ask, is why on earth would you do this? Why would you look at the margins? And the answer, again, is cost of energy over time. This is a graph or something like this that I'm guessing is somewhat familiar to a lot of you, of like, quantifying your payback period and your return on your investment. And so we did that for this project as a way. This is a public project, it's a big deal to invest above code compliance into something like this. And we can say with confidence that after 12 years, the forest preserve will break even on their initial investment in the envelope, and that initial margin of investment is a much, much larger margin over time. And this is only 100 years time scale. They're looking at 200 years. And so that's the story. Something I've heard the term lock-in effect that I think is a compelling way to think about this. This is just financial incentive, not to mention the resource conservation incentives, and really the reason that we're doing this in the first place. So now that's kind of the sciencey part. It's like, okay, all that's great, but how do we get like third graders who are coming to this building to understand, appreciate, and take a piece of this home and understand why it's important? And I think that a really compelling thing that came out of this project was the collaboration between our interpretive designer, who's standing here in the middle, and the educators, the people who are going to use this building and be, taking kids on nature walks and showing them all the amazing things about this place, and then also talking about the building. And so the question, again, was like, how do we tell the story of net zero and passive cost in a way that's meaningful for anyone who comes here? And right off the bat, so we do this through interpretive elements, right? Through exhibits and things that are actually engaging, not just a big slab of text, but, getting someone's attention, saying sometimes zero is good. What does that mean? Right off the bat, say, this is what a net zero building is. It produces as much energy as it consumes each year. And then introducing things like this little graphic and, little blurbs about what these concepts are. And people love QR codes. It's like the resurgence of the QR code, thanks to the pandemic, is this quite amazing phenomenon. And so this little QR code takes you to the energy dashboard where you can see the live monitored energy use of the building and the lobby. It's also displayed in the lobby, which I'll get here in a second. But it's a way for people to engage. And as the more you kind of interact with the building, you go up, and this is next to the front door, which is this web of life of like concepts that I think this is really one of the most compelling parts of this project, of weaving the narrative again of design performance with the place. And so this is kind of a zoom in of like some of these, little plaques, and draw your attention to the beaver, the acorn, and the feathers. And I think this is so cool how the story of Passive House can be told by beavers, acorns, and feathers. And the tenets of Passive House, which are super insulation, air tightness, high performance envelope and windows. And beavers build their dams with thick mud and sticks. That's super insulating. Acorns need an air barrier in order to germinate. If that seal breaks, they don't germinate. Once, I'm telling you, an educator, we were trying to explain what an air barrier was in this workshop, and it took like 30 minutes. And finally, someone was like, "So it's like an acorn," and we were like, "What?" And they're like, "It's like an acorn. That's an air barrier." And I, in that moment, understood what an air barrier was probably better than I ever have. So it's just really cool that they were able to distill these ideas into something so clear. And just like with our triple pane glass, and that extra layer of air, is what really helps the performance of that. Birds put air between their feathers, and that's how they stay warm in the winter. So telling the story of this through this place is a really, really cool part of this project. And that includes this dashboard, which is, we're kind of getting into increasing levels of like information. And this will be the dashboard that shows the live monitored or live energy use of the building that's monitored constantly, that you can pull up again on your phone. It'll be on the Forest Preserve's website. But again, it's all about how do you make this information accessible and interesting. So these are just a few more graphics. And then this is one of my favorite parts of the project, is this little mini-me wall assembly, with labels and tying these things to reality. So people who are interested in this kind of additional layer of detail, there's just always something more to learn, right? So that's kind of it. That's where we're at. This is where we're at. We're under construction, and that's what it looks like right now. There is a foundation, and there's some insulation, and they're working on all kinds of stuff underground, but the building will be going up and should be complete by next summer. So yeah, we're really excited about it, and just thrilled to start sharing it with institutes such as, Phius, Chicago. It's awesome. So that's it. Lindsay, I'll turn it back to you if you want to speak to the verifier side of things. Or
Sure. Yep. I'll make it super, super quick because it can be super, super quick. So, okay. So I think with this process for us, it's been this is the first commercial project that we've done that has gone through the new rounds of like Energy Star, multifamily new construction, and some of the new criteria with the different programs. So the conversation and the communication and coordination with JT and his team has, I think, like with any project, but specifically with this, because we're layering on Passive House requirements and thresholds, was critical, and that kind of filled our early days around Christmas time, and just making sure that we were keeping up with the various things that we haven't seen in the past. So the commercial program is similar to the multifamily and performance-based single-family program, in that it requires Energy Star, multifamily new construction, now zero energy ready homes, and indoor air plus, which are those built-in certifications. And then we also have the Phius QA workbook. We're carrying through the threshold is the blower door, the same blower door threshold that we see for multifamily buildings, 0.06 CFM per square foot of enclosure. But because it's a commercial building, some of the testing, the testing has been condensed. So really what we're focusing on at the end is going to be the whole building blower door and the tab verification. So to quickly go through multifamily new construction, this is kind of the founding block of this program and a lot of other green building certifications, dictating where like minimum performance values of insulation, of window values, various testing requirements that would come into play. A lot of checklists come from this program. And then to build on that, we have the Zero Energy Ready Homes program that uses the Energy Star compliance, and then it goes a little bit above from the performance perspective. Because of the nature of this project, we did not do the energy modeling for it. And we also were able to bypass the domestic hot water requirements. So I would say with any of your projects, work with your rater to make sure that you know what the specific requirements are. But for us, it was good to get some clarity also too with the 2021 version of the program of Phius, to make sure that we were in step with any of the changes that were happening from the 2018 program. And then additionally, Indoor Air Plus, which is a part of Zero Energy Ready Homes, and builds on the whole package. A new, more comprehensive version is going to be coming out soon. We've actually heard that for quite some time, but I hear it will come out. And then our Phius workbook. So the entire workbook, actually, I should put the commercial workbook, but it's the same thing as the multifamily workbook, in which you've got all of these various tabs of compliance that we'll need to look at both during mid-construction as well as final. So as we go through the mid-construction work, we'll take a look, as JT already displayed, where the project is right now. We had the insulation around the foundation. So we viewed that during mid-construction. We'll come in and we'll do the insulation grading and framing inspections and air sealing, and do a mid-construction blower door test and test the ERV ductwork, just to make sure that we are on our way to success later on. And then final testing, we'll have our blower door, the ERV wattage, the tab verification. And again, as I mentioned, the condensed status or condensed testing because of the commercial status. And for this project, so these are other blower doors that we've used in the past, multi-fans, multiple fans. But for this project, we will likely use a duct blaster because of how tight the envelope is and how small of a threshold we need to hit. We'll be using something of that nature, which is pretty darn awesome. So that's where we are at thus far. And I can't wait to get back for our framing inspections and to see more of it as the project moves on. Okay, we are down to the wire, but hopefully folks can stay just a couple minutes more, and we can answer some questions that came in.
Curtis has one here.
Yeah, I can jump in there. So yeah, what are we most nervous about? A lot, given the current construction climate, I'll say that. As of today, we just found out that the geofoam insulation under slab is back ordered and is going to delay the project schedule by a month because they can't find that insulation anywhere. And so that's something we knew we would be confronting heading into construction right now. So I would say, yeah, supply chain issues are a huge concern. Windows has become, that's been like I need to partner with someone here and open a window manufacturing company for high performance windows, because someone needs to make this easier. And with so many different players involved and working with international manufacturers, there's certainly been a challenge there. Also, just the union labor aspects of this project have been quite challenging from the bidding perspective and procurement side of things.
Hey, JT, when you guys track like cost to build for projects, I'm sure it's all over the map, but did the client ask you to kind of quantify? I guess the ICCF grant asked you to quantify what's the difference between the net zero building and the code built building, and whatever the baseline is, the building you would have built otherwise without the grant. Do you have a sense of what the delta is there from a cost standpoint? Because just out. I'm sure you could have used a little less insulation if it was just a box. You know what I mean? But I totally get the experience and the windows, driving the experience, which has got to be like the reason for the building, right? So, yeah, what do you think about that on the cost side?
Yeah, that was interesting. For that grant, yeah, you're absolutely right. We were quantifying not necessarily a passive house premium, but a net zero premium, which is a slightly different thing. They're very much related and kind of, a lot of those costs overlap. But for the purposes of the grant, the project was awarded, I believe, about $500,000 of that grant, which represents a portion of those premium costs associated with net zero. And that includes the PV, that includes the monitoring period, and supplemental design and engineering fees. There's a lot that's included. The actual material hard costs in the envelope, that slide, when we pull it up, it's like 100 and I want to say like $150,000 to $160,000 in additional investment in the envelope specifically. And so that delta, again, I think is based on my experience working on houses up in Maine, pretty reasonable. As a percentage of the overall construction cost. So yeah, that answers your question, but it's gotten a lot more expensive, tell you, over the past year. Estimates were coming in by the time this went out to bid about 30 to 35% over where we thought we would be. And that's why this project is being phased with the South building coming later.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, something we're all confronted with right now.
One more quick question. Are you doing the energy modeling yourself, or you guys you consulting that, or how are you doing the WUFI?
Yeah, I'm the big WUFI user, which has been interesting. Cool. I am not a CPHC yet. I'm still in training. So my experience is, I would like to say, is like boots on the ground at a design build firm, learning, the kind of the tenets of passive house and stuff like that. So I feel like I am still getting caught up very much with, the kind of building science aspect of it. But we have an awesome design performance team internally at the firm, and we've all taken a much more acute interest in WUFI and just learning as much as we can, as quickly as we can.
Cool. You were at Geologic, I'm guessing?
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
We're just talking today on the council call. So yeah, great place to be, huh?
Yeah,
anyway.
Awesome place to learn. Yeah, now it's Opal and Geologic.
Oh, right, yeah. Okay, I'll stop monopolizing, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm down in Mississippi, have a beer with you sometime.
Yeah, please do.
A conference.
Yeah, I'll be in Chicago in October, so love to see all of you there.
Great.
Cool.
So I think does anyone else have any other questions for JT?
Quick one. I don't remember, did you discuss anything about the heating system?
No, I didn't. That's a great question. So the heating system is something we're still talking about.
Okay.
So the engineer on this project is awesome. They, I think, more traditionally have done larger projects, and so it's just an evolving conversation about back and forth on the extent of the system. But it's a heat pump. We're really pushing for geothermal, which they do on a lot of big projects, and we kind of quickly saw that wasn't appropriate for this scale. And then a dedicated VRF coupled with ventilation and ERV.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the mechanical system.
Great.
Okay, well, JT, thanks so much.
Thank you guys for having me.
Super cool. And
we see the building. We have to have it on a tour here before too long, I hope, or go see it on a tour.
Right. We're talking with Jenny about that. Who knows?
All
Maybe,
right. Oh, good, yeah.
maybe it'll happen. Yep. So, so awesome. All right. Well, thank you to everyone for joining us. JT, thank you so much for your time and for sharing all of this with us tonight. I think you can tell we're super stoked about it. And, you know, both from the nerd out passive house side of it to this is going to be a super cool building and we can't wait to visit perspective. So thank you everyone again. Next month we will be meeting at the same time, third Wednesday of the month at 5 o'clock, and the topic will soon be released. We're just wrapping up some details, and I guess we'll see y'all then.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Have a great night. Thanks all.
Thank you,
Take care.
JT.
Great stuff.